Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines we're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. And Hugo, you wrote in your column this week about a coming fiscal disaster. You likened Republicans and Democrats to Thelma and Louise. Why do you think both parties are to blame for setting the country up long-term for fiscal troubles?
Both parties have pretty much abandoned the idea of fiscal responsibility. The Democrats essentially believe that they can spend as much as they want, perhaps even the more the better, without any adverse consequences. The Republicans are terrified that they will be punished, as they probably would be, by voters if they showed any signs of fiscal responsibility and said that Medicare and Social Security need to be cut. They're playing a game of chicken because both of those programs, Medicare and Social Security, are in deep trouble and going to run out of money very soon. But ever since, there was a really interesting interchange between President Biden and the Republicans at the State of the Union. He accused the Republicans of wanting to cut those programs, and they all, not all, some of them leapt up and called him a liar and that sort of thing. And then he closed the trap and said, oh, so we're agreed. No one wants to cut this, right? And moved on. So the Republicans are now in a very difficult position. I think that their position is no changes to these things as part of the negotiation over raising the debt ceiling, rather than never any negotiations on these things. But it's very easy for the Democrats to now that the Republicans have painted themselves into a corner.
And given how politically toxic it has been recently for Republicans to suggest they want to reform Social Security and Medicare, Senator Rick Scott's plan comes to mind. How can Republicans approach this without inviting attacks?
The truth is that it's pretty much impossible to propose changes that without getting attacked, because any change that is worth doing is going to reduce the amount of money that taxpayer dollars that go into these programs. There are, I think, legitimate ways of doing that. You cannot simply guillotine those programs, as would happen if no changes were made. Nor can you say, okay, someone who's 64 years old and is going to be retiring next year doesn't get Social Security or has their Social Security cut in half. But there have been proposals around for decades about gradually increasing the retirement age. When Social Security was introduced, the average age at which people died was around 65. So there wasn't very much, there wasn't an expectation of very high payouts. Now it's perfectly normal for people to live 20 and 30 years collecting Social Security. So, and I think that there was something like 40 people in work supporting for every one person who was collecting Social Security when it was started. And now there's only 3. So it's just completely untenable. It's very difficult to do, but first of all, the Republicans have to, should not be doing this as part of the debt ceiling. They should not be putting the full faith and credit of the United States on the line in their negotiations on Social Security and Medicare. They're much too big. There needs to be a long-term solution. But the truth is that anybody who proposes changes that are worth doing will be proposing reduced benefits in one way or another. There's no way of avoiding that, being attacked by that. And the Republicans, if they want to be the fiscally prudent party and be rewarded for that by voters, are just going to have to accept that and have a good way of talking back about it.
Shifting gears a little bit, we're coming up on, I believe we are up on, the 1-year anniversary of the start of the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion. President Biden traveled there recently, a surprise stop on his European swing, and he said that the U.S. would continue to support Ukraine as long as it takes. Do you think at some point he needs to lay out some sort of strategic endpoint?
I think it's not a good idea to say any particular point is an end point, because you then signal to your adversary, in this case Vladimir Putin, that there's a point at which you're going to give up, and all of the enemy has to do is to last until then, and then his principal obstacle to victory, which is the United States, will go away. So it's not a good idea to produce an endpoint. That doesn't mean, however, that our commitment needs to be just open-ended. There needs to be accountability. Ukraine is a very corrupt country, and it's really Congress's duty to make sure that it follows the money. The United States has committed so far a total of about $80 billion, which is a lot of money. and Ukraine is like 130th on the non-corruption list. So there's a lot of money that can skitter away into pockets which it should not go into. It's very important for the United States to put pressure on Zelensky to make sure that the money is used in as clean a way as possible and used properly, and it's up to Congress to monitor and hold the administration accountable for the way in which it pays the money out.
And finally, President Biden has sort of said that his intention of getting involved in Ukraine is to safeguard democracy there. I mean, is this a consistent view from Biden and the Democrats?
No, it absolutely isn't. It's a very good point. Biden, it's absolutely right that the United States should be on the side of democratic sovereignty and territorial integrity. It is absolutely right to oppose an aggressive territorial expansion by the Russians into Ukraine. But if President Biden really believed in sovereign democracy and territorial integrity, he would not be allowing the disaster that we're watching on the southern border, the US border with Mexico. It is a moral imperative to control the border, to keep it secure, and to govern in the way that the population of the United States, the voting population, wants, which is they want immigration under control, and they do not want 2 million or 1 million or even hundreds of thousands every year of illegal immigrants entering the country. President Biden has capitulated entirely to the left wing of his party on domestic policy, and they want untrammeled immigration because they don't really believe in sovereign nation states anymore, and they're very happy to have as many people come in by whatever means and illegally as possible. So no, President Biden is utterly inconsistent on the subject of sovereign democracy, and Ukraine and our own southern border demonstrate that.
Well, Hugo, thank you for being here today. You can get more writing from Hugo and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.